There are three things I know for certain in this world: how to wire a house without burning it down, how to deliver sarcasm with surgical precision, and the undeniable fact that my wife is cheating on me with a meathead who thinks protein powder is a food group. My name is Pete Halverson, and I'm 41 years old, which means I'm old enough to know better but still young enough to do something spectacularly stupid about it. I'm an electrician by trade, union card and all, which in Briarwood makes me about as exotic as a unicorn. Everyone else around here seems to be in consulting or digital marketing or some other job that requires nothing more than a laptop and an inflated sense of self-importance. I was crouched in our basement, rewiring the breaker box that had been acting up for weeks, when I heard my wife Allison upstairs, giggling into her phone like a teenager who just got asked to prom. The sound made my teeth itch. Allie used to laugh like that with me, back when we first met 15 years ago. Now the only time I hear genuine joy in her voice is when she's talking to someone else. "Oh, Trent," she cooed, and I nearly electrocuted myself. "You're so bad. I can't wait for our next session." Session, right, because apparently Trent Grady's gym offers very specialized personal training that requires my wife to come home with her hair messed up and her lipstick completely gone. Either that, or his workout routines are more intense than Navy SEAL training. I finished connecting the last wire and flipped the main breaker back on. The lights hummed to life, and I couldn't help but think that if only relationships were as simple as electrical circuits. Input, output, and when something goes wrong, you can actually see the problem and fix it. "Pete!" Allie called down the stairs. "I'm going out for drinks with Monica and the girls." Don't wait up. The girls. That's what she called her pack of suburban housewives who spent their days gossiping over overpriced lattes and their nights prowling wine bars like they were still 25. Monica Brennan was the ringleader, a bottle-blonde real estate agent who treated other people's business like her personal entertainment network. "Have fun," I called back, because what else was I supposed to say? "Don't go meet your boyfriend?" "Don't lie to my face? Don't pretend this marriage isn't circling the drain like yesterday's dishwater?" I heard the front door slam and her BMW purr to life in the driveway. Through the basement window, I watched her back out and speed away, probably texting Trent before she even reached the end of our street. My daughter Maddie appeared at the top of the basement stairs, all 13 years old, and armed with the kind of withering sarcasm that would make a drill sergeant proud. She got that from me, unfortunately. "Let me guess," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Mom's having another girls' night where she comes home smelling like cheap cologne that definitely isn't yours?" "Language, kiddo." "I didn't swear." "You didn't have to. Your tone did all the heavy lifting." She grinned, and for a moment, I could see the little girl who used to help me sort screws and washers in my toolbox. "Dad, I'm not stupid, and neither are you. So why are you pretending everything's fine?" That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? Why was I pretending? Maybe because admitting your marriage is falling apart feels like admitting you failed at something everyone else seems to handle just fine. Maybe because I still remembered the woman I married, even if she'd been replaced by this stranger who treated our house like a hotel and our family like an inconvenience. Or maybe because I was waiting for the right moment to do something about it. "Your mom's going through a phase," I said, climbing the stairs. "Yeah, it's called a midlife crisis. Jenny Morrison's mom did the same thing last year, started taking yoga classes with some guy named Brad. Now Jenny lives with her dad, and her mom lives in a studio apartment and posts inspirational quotes on Facebook. Sometimes I forgot how observant kids could be. Maddie had been watching this train wreck unfold, just like I had, but she didn't have the luxury of pretending it wasn't happening. "You hungry?" I asked, changing the subject. "I was thinking pizza. Can we get the good stuff? Not that cardboard mom always orders because it's healthier. Extra cheese, pepperoni, and enough grease to horrify your mother. Deal?" "Deal." While we waited for the pizza, Maddie sprawled across the living room couch, scrolling through her phone with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for brain surgery. I sat in my recliner, the one Allie constantly threatened to throw away because it didn't match her carefully curated aesthetic. "Dad," Maddie said without looking up from her screen, "do you know what everyone at school is saying about Mom?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "They're saying she's dating Trent Grady. You know, the guy who owns that gym downtown? The one who posts shirtless selfies on Instagram like he's auditioning for a romance novel cover?" I felt something cold settle in my chest. It was one thing to suspect your wife was cheating. It was another thing entirely to discover that your teenage daughter's classmates knew about it before you did. "What exactly are they saying?" Maddie finally looked up, her expression serious. "Jenny's older sister works at the front desk at Trent's gym. She says Mom comes in 3 times a week for private sessions that happen after hours. And last week, Mrs. Patterson saw them having dinner at that fancy Italian place downtown. The one you wanted to take Mom to for your anniversary, but she said was too expensive." The pizza arrived before I could respond, which was probably for the best. I wasn't sure what I would have said anyway. How do you explain to your 13-year-old daughter that her mother has apparently decided to blow up your family for a guy who probably thinks literature is something you read on supplement bottles? We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who understand each other without needing words. Maddie had always been my ally in this house, the one person who appreciated my terrible dad jokes and didn't roll her eyes when I got excited about a particularly challenging electrical job. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Ray Martinez, my best friend since high school and the only ex-cop I knew who was more cynical than me. "Beer? I've got news about your situation." Ray lived in the apartment complex about 10 minutes away, the kind of place that catered to divorced guys and young professionals who couldn't afford houses in Briarwood. His unit was sparse but clean, decorated mainly with sports memorabilia and a collection of true crime books that would make most people nervous. "So," he said, handing me a bottle of beer that was actually cold, unlike the lukewarm disasters Allie kept stocked in our refrigerator. "I did a little digging on your boy Trent. He's not my boy. Figure of speech. Anyway, turns out Mr. Muscle isn't quite the successful entrepreneur he pretends to be. His gym is 3 months behind on rent, he's got 2 DUIs from last year, and according to my buddy who works insurance fraud, he's been running a little side business selling steroids to high school kids." I took a long pull from my beer. Allie sure knows how to pick them. Gets better. I also talked to Monica's ex-husband. You remember Dave, right? Works construction, decent guy until Monica decided she needed to find herself with a yoga instructor. "Yeah, I remember Dave." "Well, Dave's been keeping tabs on the whole social circle, and apparently your wife's affair is the worst-kept secret in Briarwood. Monica's been spreading it around like it's breaking news, and half the neighborhood knows about it." That explained the looks I'd been getting at the grocery store. The pitying glances from other husbands, the way conversations stopped when I walked into a room. I wasn't just the last to know about my wife's affair. I was apparently the only one who hadn't officially acknowledged it. "There's more," Ray continued. "I heard from a reliable source that Allie's been telling people she's planning to leave you. Says she's tired of being married to a blue-collar nobody and wants to upgrade to someone with ambition." Blue-collar nobody. After 15 years of marriage, that's how she described me to her friends. The guy who kept the lights on in her perfect house, who never missed one of Maddie's soccer games, who still brought her coffee in bed every Sunday morning even though she barely looked up from her phone to acknowledge it. "So what are you going to do?" Ray asked. I stared at the label on my beer bottle, thinking about Allie's laugh, about Maddie's knowing looks, about the way our house felt more like a museum than a home. "I'm going to do what any reasonable man would do," I said finally. "I'm going to let her find out exactly what life without a blue-collar nobody looks like." Ray grinned, the kind of smile that had probably made criminals nervous back when he was wearing a badge. "Now you're talking. What do you need?" The opportunity came sooner than I expected, wrapped in Allie's breathless announcement over breakfast 3 days later. She stood in our kitchen, looking like she'd just won the lottery, practically vibrating with excitement. "I've made a decision," she said, not bothering to sit down. "I'm going on a self-discovery retreat. 2 weeks in Colorado, hiking and meditation and really getting in touch with who I am as a person." Maddie looked up from her cereal, eyebrows raised. "Self-discovery? What did you lose?" "Your sense of humor, apparently," Allie snapped. "This is important, Madison. I need to reconnect with my authentic self." I kept my expression neutral, even though inside I was doing cartwheels. "Sounds expensive." "It's an investment in my personal growth. Trent recommended it. He went last year and said it completely changed his perspective on life." Of course he did. I wondered if Trent's perspective change included learning how to spell authentic, or if that was still a work in progress. "When do you leave?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning. I know it's short notice, but there was a last-minute cancellation, and Trent said I should grab the opportunity while I can." Maddie made a sound that was somewhere between a snort and a laugh. "Let me guess, Trent's going on this retreat too, right? What a coincidence." Allie's cheeks flushed pink. "He might be attending the same program, yes, but that's not why I'm going. This is about me, about figuring out what I want from life." "Sounds like you already figured that out," Maddie muttered into her cereal bowl. "What was that?" "Nothing, Mom. I said it sounds great." I watched this exchange with the detached fascination of someone observing a nature documentary. Here was my wife, announcing that she was essentially running away with her boyfriend, and she was doing it with the kind of self-righteous conviction that would make a televangelist proud. "Well," I said, setting down my coffee cup, "if you need to find yourself, who am I to stand in your way?" "Take all the time you need." Something flickered across Allie's face. Confusion, maybe, or disappointment. I think she'd been expecting me to fight her on this, to give her a reason to storm out and play the victim. Instead, I was handing her exactly what she wanted, and it seemed to throw her off balance. "You're okay with this? Honey, if you need to go to Colorado to figure out who you are, then that's what you need to do. I'll hold down the fort here. But what about Maddie? And the house? And your work schedule?" "I think I can manage to take care of my own daughter and my own house for 2 weeks. I've been doing both for years anyway." That last comment hit its mark. Allie's jaw tightened, but she couldn't exactly argue the point without admitting that she'd been checked out of family life for months. "Fine," she said. "I'll pack tonight." After she left for what I assumed was a pre-retreat planning session with Trent, Maddie looked at me with something approaching admiration. "You're up to something," she said. "I'm up to taking care of you while your mother finds herself." "Dad, I'm 13, not 3. I know that look. You've got a plan." "Smart kid. Too smart sometimes." "What I've got is 2 weeks to show your mother what life is like when she doesn't have someone cleaning up her messes." "Can I help?" "You can help by being exactly who you are. Let me handle the rest." That evening, while Allie packed enough clothes for a month-long expedition, I called Ray. "She's leaving tomorrow morning," I told him. 2 weeks in Colorado with Captain America. "Perfect timing. How much stuff are we talking about moving?" "Everything that matters. I want her to come home to exactly what she's leaving behind. Nothing." "What about Maddie's stuff?" "Maddie's coming with me." I already talked to her school about a temporary address change. Ray was quiet for a moment. "You sure about this, Pete? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back." I looked around our living room, at the furniture Allie had chosen without asking my opinion, at the family photos where her smile looked increasingly forced, at the life we'd built that had somehow become a performance instead of a partnership. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The next morning, Allie left at dawn, her suitcase packed and her face glowing with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen in years. She kissed Maddie goodbye and gave me a perfunctory hug that felt like she was embracing a stranger. "I'll call when I get there," she said. "Take your time," I replied. "Really find yourself." As soon as her BMW disappeared around the corner, I called in sick to work and texted Ray. Operation Self-Discovery is a go. Ray arrived an hour later with a rental truck and 2 guys from his construction crew who owed him favors. By noon, we had loaded every piece of furniture, every box of belongings, every trace of the life Allie and I had built together. "Where do you want all this stuff?" Ray asked, surveying the pile of furniture in the truck. "Storage unit downtown." I already rented one. "What about her stuff specifically?" I held up a single cardboard box. "This is her stuff. Everything else belongs to the marriage she's walking away from." We left the house completely empty except for a single folding chair in the living room and an envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside the envelope was a note I'd written and rewritten a dozen times before settling on something simple. "Allie, I discovered myself too. Turns out I'm someone who deserves better than being married to a woman who thinks I'm a blue-collar nobody. The house is yours. You'll need to figure out how to pay for it. Maddie and I will be in touch about custody arrangements. Hope you find what you're looking for in Colorado." "Pete," Maddie surveyed the empty house with satisfaction. "It looks bigger this way." "It looks honest," I said. We spent that night in a hotel, ordering room service and watching movies, talking about everything except what we'd just done. Maddie seemed lighter somehow, like she'd been holding her breath for months and could finally exhale. "Dad," she said, as we were getting ready for bed, "are you scared?" "Terrified," I admitted, "but sometimes being scared means you're doing something important." "Good. I was worried you might chicken out." My phone started ringing around 6 the next evening. Allie calling from Colorado. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again, and again. By the 4th call, I answered. "Pete? Thank God. I've been trying to reach you all day. Sorry, busy day at work. How's the retreat?" "It's fine. Listen, I tried calling the house phone, but it just goes to voicemail. Is something wrong with the service?" "I wouldn't know. I'm not there." A pause. "What do you mean you're not there?" "Where are you?" "Hotel. Maddie and I decided to have a little staycation while you're discovering yourself." "A staycation? Pete, what's going on? You're acting weird." "I'm acting different." "There's a distinction." "I don't understand. Why aren't you at home? What about Maddie's school?" "Maddie's fine. She's adapting better than I expected, actually." Another pause. Longer this time. "Pete, you're scaring me. What's happening?" "Nothing's happening, Allie. You're in Colorado finding yourself, and I'm here figuring out what life looks like without someone who thinks I'm a blue-collar nobody." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "Who told you I said that? Does it matter?" "The point is, you said it, and you meant it. Pete, we need to talk about this. I'm coming home. Don't cut your retreat short on my account. Take all the time you need. Really discover who you are. I'll be here when you get back. Promise me you'll be at the house when I get home. I promise I'll be available when you get back." It wasn't technically a lie, but it wasn't exactly the truth either. I'd learned that from watching Allie navigate conversations for the past year. How to say one thing while meaning something completely different. After I hung up, Maddie looked at me with something approaching awe. "You're really doing this. We're really doing this. You sure you're okay with having a dad who's about to become the most talked about divorce in Briarwood?" "Dad, I've been waiting for you to grow a backbone for 2 years. I'm more than okay with it." Allie came home 3 days early, cutting short her journey of self-discovery the moment she realized her safety net had disappeared. I knew she was back because Monica Brennan called me at 7 in the morning, her voice practically vibrating with gossip-fueled excitement. "Pete, honey, I just saw Allie pull into your driveway, and she looked absolutely frantic. Is everything okay?" Monica's concern was about as genuine as a $3 bill, but I played along. "Everything's fine, Monica. Thanks for checking. It's just that she was banging on your front door and screaming, and the neighbors are starting to notice, and you know how people talk." Of course the neighbors were noticing. That was exactly what I'd been counting on. In a place like Briarwood, reputation was everything, and Allie had spent years building her image as the perfect suburban wife and mother. Having a public meltdown in her own driveway was about as far from perfect as she could get. "I'm sure she's just tired from her trip," I said. "You know how traveling can be." "But Pete, she seemed really upset." "Maybe you should. Monica, I appreciate your concern, but I'm sure Allie can handle whatever's bothering her. She's a very capable woman." I hung up before she could respond and immediately called Ray. "She's back," I said. "How bad is the meltdown?" "According to Monica, it's visible from space. Allie's apparently screaming at an empty house while the whole neighborhood watches." "Beautiful. You ready for phase 2? "More than ready." Ray and I had spent the last 3 days preparing for Allie's return. While she was in Colorado discovering herself with Trent, we'd been busy making sure her homecoming would be as educational as possible. I drove to the house an hour later, taking my time, letting her stew in whatever emotions she was working through. When I pulled into the driveway, I could see her sitting on the front steps, her expensive suitcase beside her, her face streaked with mascara. She looked up when I got out of my truck, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She looked lost and confused, like a child who'd wandered away from her parents at the mall. Then I remembered the phrase, blue-collar nobody, and the feeling passed. "Pete," she said, standing up. "What did you do?" "I cleaned house," I said, walking past her to unlock the front door. She followed me inside, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors, the sound echoing in the empty space. I'd left the folding chair in the living room and nothing else. The echo of her footsteps seemed to emphasize just how hollow the house had become. "Where is everything?" she whispered. "Storage." "What do you mean, storage?" "I mean, I put it in a storage unit, all of it. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, every trace of the life we built together." She spun around, looking at the empty rooms like she couldn't quite process what she was seeing. "You can't just take my things." "I didn't take your things. I took our things. Your things are in that box on the kitchen counter." She rushed to the kitchen and tore open the box I'd left for her. Inside were her personal items, jewelry, photos, clothes, toiletries. Everything that was specifically hers and nothing that belonged to us as a couple. "This is insane," she said, her voice rising. "You can't just empty our house because you're having some kind of midlife crisis." Midlife crisis? That's interesting, coming from someone who just spent 3 days in Colorado with her boyfriend. Her face went white. "How did you know about Trent?" "Allie, everyone knows about Trent. The whole neighborhood has been watching you two play house while I played the fool. But that's over now." "Pete, you don't understand. It's not what you think." "Really? Then explain it to me. Explain how you've been having private training sessions with a guy who looks like he fell off a romance novel cover. Explain why you come home from those sessions looking like you've been wrestling. Explain why you light up when he texts you but barely look at me when I talk to you." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. We both knew there was no explanation that would make any of this better. "I want you to put everything back," she said finally. "No." "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no." "You wanted to discover yourself, Allie. You wanted to figure out what life would be like without your blue-collar nobody husband. Well, congratulations, you're about to find out." "Where's Maddie?" "Maddie's fine. She's staying with me. You can't just take my daughter." "I'm not taking her. She's choosing to stay with the parent who actually wants to be a parent." That hit home. Allie's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might actually cry real tears instead of the angry, frustrated ones she'd been shedding. "Pete, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work things out." "You didn't make mistakes, Allie. You made choices. You chose Trent over me. You chose your friends' opinions over your family. You chose to call me a blue-collar nobody behind my back. Those weren't accidents or mistakes. They were decisions. I never meant for any of this to happen. But you're glad it did. Admit it. You've been looking for an excuse to leave this marriage for months, and Trent gave you one. The only thing you didn't count on was me leaving first. She looked around the empty house again, and I could see her trying to process the reality of her situation. No furniture, no husband, no safety net. Just an empty house and a mortgage she couldn't afford on her real estate agent's salary. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want you to be happy, Allie. I really do. I want you to find whatever it is you're looking for. But I'm not going to stick around and finance your journey of self-discovery." "So that's it? 15 years of marriage, and you're just walking away?" "You walked away first. I'm just making it official." My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and saw it was from Monica. "Everything okay? Saw Allie's car at the house. Call if you need anything." I showed Allie the message. "Your friend Monica's been keeping the neighborhood updated on your situation. Apparently your meltdown this morning was quite the show." Allie's face went from white to red. "Monica saw me?" "Monica saw you. Mrs. Patterson saw you. The Johnsons saw you. Pretty much everyone on the block got a front row seat to your homecoming." "Oh, God! It gets better. While you were in Colorado, Monica's been sharing some very interesting stories about your relationship with Trent. Apparently, she thinks your affair is the most entertaining thing to happen in Briarwood since the mayor got caught embezzling from the park fund." Allie sank into the folding chair, the only piece of furniture left in the house. She looked small and defeated, nothing like the confident woman who'd announced her self-discovery retreat a week ago. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you figure out what you want. You can try to make things work with Trent, you can find someone new, you can focus on your career. The world is your oyster, Allie. You're free to be whoever you want to be. And Maddie? Maddie will always be your daughter. But she's old enough to decide where she wants to live and who she wants to live with. And right now, she wants to live with the parent who doesn't treat family like an inconvenience." I turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "Oh, and Allie? The mortgage payment is due next week. You might want to call the bank and explain your new situation. I'm sure they'll be very understanding." The next few days unfolded like a masterpiece of suburban destruction, orchestrated with the precision of a Swiss watch and the subtlety of a freight train. I'd underestimated just how quickly news travels in a place like Briarwood, and how thoroughly a person's reputation can be shredded by the very people who used to be their closest friends. Monica, it turned out, had been waiting for years to take Allie down a peg. What I'd initially taken for genuine friendship was actually a carefully maintained rivalry, and the moment Allie showed weakness, Monica pounced like a shark sensing blood in the water. The first casualty was Allie's job. Monica had connections throughout the local real estate market, and within 48 hours of Allie's meltdown, every agent in town knew about the affair, the abandoned family, and the very public breakdown in her own driveway. Real estate, like most sales jobs, was built on trust and reputation. Clients wanted to work with people who had their lives together, not someone whose personal drama was the talk of the town. Ray called me with updates like he was providing play-by-play commentary on a particularly entertaining sporting event. "Your wife got fired this morning," he reported on Thursday. Apparently, 3 different clients called her broker, asking to be reassigned to different agents. Something about not wanting to work with someone who was going through personal issues. That was fast. It gets better. Monica's been posting cryptic messages on Facebook about friends who show their true colors and the importance of family values. She's not naming names, but everyone knows who she's talking about. I felt a twinge of something that might have been guilt, but it passed quickly. Allie had made her choices, and now she was experiencing the consequences. I hadn't forced her to have an affair, and I hadn't forced her to treat our marriage like a temporary inconvenience. What about Trent? Funny you should ask. Turns out Mr. Muscle's gym has been operating without proper permits for the past 6 months. Amazing how these things come to light when people start paying attention. I knew Ray well enough to recognize his handiwork. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Me? I'm just a concerned citizen who believes in following proper safety regulations. If Trent's been cutting corners on his business, that's between him and the city inspector. The city inspector, it turned out, was very thorough. By Friday afternoon, Trent's gym was closed pending a full safety review. According to Maddie, who'd heard it from her friend Jenny, whose sister worked at the gym, Trent had thrown an absolute fit when the inspector showed up, screaming about harassment and conspiracy theories. He actually accused Mrs. Patterson of calling in a fake complaint because she was jealous of his success, Maddie reported over dinner. Mrs. Patterson is 73 years old and uses a walker. I don't think she's jealous of anyone who makes their living flexing in mirrors. Language, I said automatically, but I was grinning. I didn't swear. Your tone is getting dangerously close to disrespectful. My tone is getting dangerously close to accurate. That weekend, I took Maddie to her soccer game, the first one Allie had missed in 3 years. The other parents were clearly dying to ask me about the situation, but no one quite had the courage to bring it up directly. Instead, I got a lot of meaningful looks and carefully casual questions about how I was holding up. It was during the second half of the game that Trent made his grand appearance. He came strutting across the field like he owned the place, all muscles and attitude, wearing a tank top that showed off his gym-sculpted physique. I had to admit, he was impressive in the way that a peacock is impressive, flashy, colorful, and completely ridiculous. "Pete," he called out, loud enough for half the parents to hear. "We need to talk." I stood up from the bleachers, taking my time, letting him come to me. The other parents were suddenly very interested in our conversation, phones discreetly positioned to record whatever was about to happen. "Trent," I said when he got close enough. "How's the gym business?" His face flushed red. "You know damn well how the gym business is. What I want to know is what kind of man abandons his wife when she needs him most. The kind of man who gets tired of sharing her with her personal trainer. Allie and I are friends. We have a connection you obviously never understood. A connection. Is that what we're calling it now? She's a remarkable woman who deserves better than some small-minded electrician who can't appreciate what he has." I looked around at the crowd of parents who were now openly staring at us, then back at Trent. He was bigger than me, younger than me, and probably stronger than me. But he was also standing in front of a dozen witnesses, making threats at a children's soccer game, and I could see in his eyes that he knew he'd made a mistake. "You're right," I said. "Allie does deserve better. She deserves someone who's honest with her, someone who doesn't sneak around behind other people's backs, someone who builds things instead of just tearing them down." "I build things. I built a successful business. You built a gym that got shut down for safety violations. That's not exactly the same thing as success. That was harassment. Someone called in false complaints because they're jealous of what Allie and I have. What you and Allie have is a mess. What you and Allie had was an affair that broke up a family. If you want to build something real with her, you're going to have to do it without using my marriage as a foundation." Trent stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same scent I'd been smelling on Allie's clothes for months. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won something? I think I've learned something. I've learned that some people aren't worth fighting for, and some fights aren't worth having. This isn't over." "Yes, it is. You got what you wanted, Trent. You got Allie. Now you get to figure out what to do with her." He stood there for a moment, clearly trying to think of something devastating to say, some comeback that would put me in my place. Instead, he just looked like a man who'd won a prize he was beginning to realize he didn't actually want. "Come on, Maddie," I called to my daughter, who'd been watching the whole exchange with undisguised fascination. "Let's go get some ice cream." As we walked away, I heard one of the other parents say, "Well, that was better than cable." Maddie waited until we were in the truck before she started laughing. "Dad, that was amazing. Did you see his face when you mentioned the gym getting shut down? I thought he was going to explode. I saw it. And when you said that thing about building versus tearing down, that was like something out of a movie. Your old man still has a few tricks left." "A few tricks?" "Dad, you just destroyed that guy without even raising your voice. That wasn't a few tricks. That was surgical." We drove to the ice cream place in comfortable silence, both of us processing what had just happened. I felt lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there until it was gone. "Dad," Maddie said as we sat outside the ice cream shop, "are you happy?" It was a simple question, but it caught me off guard. Was I happy? My marriage was over. My wife was living in an empty house with a mortgage she couldn't afford, and I was probably going to be the subject of neighborhood gossip for months. "Yeah," I said, surprised to realize it was true. "I think I am." "Good. Because Mom called me yesterday." "What did she say?" "She wanted to know if I was mad at her. If I blamed her for everything that happened." "What did you tell her?" I told her I wasn't mad. I told her I was disappointed. And I told her that disappointment was worse than anger because anger goes away, but disappointment sticks around. Sometimes I forgot how wise my daughter could be. That's pretty heavy stuff for a 13-year-old. "Yeah, well, I've had a pretty heavy year." 3 weeks after the soccer field confrontation, just when I thought things might be settling into a new normal, Allie and Trent decided to make one. Last desperate play. It was a Thursday night in late October, the kind of evening when the air carries a hint of winter and the streetlights come on early. Maddie and I were in our new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom place that felt more like home than the house I'd shared with Allie ever had. I was helping Maddie with her algebra homework when my phone rang. Ray's name appeared on the screen, and something in his voice immediately put me on alert. "Pete, you need to get down to the house, now." "What's going on?" "Allie and her boyfriend just broke into your old place, Mrs. Patterson called it in, said they were screaming about taking back what's theirs. Cops are on the way, but I thought you'd want to see this." I looked at Maddie, who'd clearly heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. "Stay here," I told her. "Lock the door, don't answer it for anyone except me or Ray." "Dad, I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. She's my mom. If she's having some kind of breakdown, I should be there. If your mom is having a breakdown, the last thing she needs is an audience. Especially not her daughter." Maddie crossed her arms, a gesture so reminiscent of her mother that it stopped me cold. "Dad, I've been watching this train wreck for months. I'm not going to hide in the apartment while you deal with the cleanup." She had a point, but I wasn't about to drag my 13-year-old daughter into whatever drama was unfolding at the house. "Maddie, I need you to trust me on this one." "I do trust you. That's why I want to come with you, because I know you'll handle it right." In the end, I compromised. Maddie could come, but she had to stay in the truck while I dealt with whatever Allie and Trent had gotten themselves into. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than leaving her alone to worry. The scene at the house was even more pathetic than I'd expected. Allie's BMW was parked sideways across the driveway, the driver's door hanging open like she'd abandoned it in a hurry. Trent's ridiculous pickup truck, the kind with oversized tires and chrome accessories that screamed compensating for something, was parked on the lawn, its headlights illuminating the front of the house. Through the living room window, I could see 2 figures moving around in the empty space, their voices carrying across the yard in angry, incoherent bursts. Mrs. Patterson was standing on her front porch in her bathrobe, talking rapidly into her phone. When she saw me, she waved me over. "Pete, thank goodness you're here. They've been at it for 20 minutes, screaming about furniture and betrayal and I don't know what else. I called the police, but you know how long it takes them to respond to domestic disturbances. What exactly are they doing?" "From what I can tell, they're looking for something." They keep talking about money and belongings and how you stole everything from them. I could hear sirens in the distance, still several minutes away. Whatever was going to happen, it was going to happen before the police arrived. Mrs. Patterson, would you mind keeping an eye on Maddie? She's in my truck, and I don't want her to see whatever's about to go down. Of course, dear. You be careful in there. That young man looks like he's been drinking, and your wife, well, she doesn't look like herself. I walked up to the front door, which was standing wide open, and stepped inside. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the empty space, and both Allie and Trent spun around to face me. They looked like they'd been through a war. Allie's hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, her clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them. Trent was shirtless, his perfect physique marred by scratches on his arms and a bruise on his cheek. They both reeked of alcohol and desperation. "Pete," Allie said, her voice slurred slightly. "Tell him where you put our stuff. Our stuff! The furniture, the decorations, everything you stole from this house." I looked around the empty living room, then back at my wife and her boyfriend. "I didn't steal anything, Allie. I moved our belongings to storage because I'm not paying to maintain a house for someone who doesn't want to be married to me. Those things belong to both of us." "You're right, they do. And when we get divorced, we'll divide them appropriately. Until then, they stay where they are." Trent stepped forward, swaying slightly. "You can't just take someone's stuff because your feelings got hurt." "My feelings got hurt?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Trent, my wife has been sleeping with you for months. My feelings didn't get hurt. My marriage got destroyed." "That's not what happened," Allie said. "You don't understand the situation." "Then explain it to me. Explain how you ended up in Colorado with your personal trainer. Explain why you've been lying to me for months. Explain why you called me a blue-collar nobody to your friends." "I never said that." "Monica heard you say it. At the wine bar downtown, 3 weeks ago. You told her and Jules that you were tired of being married to someone with no ambition." Allie's face went white. She'd forgotten about that conversation, or maybe she'd been too drunk to remember it clearly. Either way, being confronted with her own words seemed to deflate some of her righteous anger. "That's not—" "I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it, Allie? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you meant exactly what you said." Trent, who'd been growing increasingly agitated during this exchange, suddenly lunged forward. "You son of a—" He never finished the sentence. As soon as he moved toward me, I sidestepped and let his momentum carry him past me. He stumbled, caught himself on the wall, and spun around with murder in his eyes. "You think you're so smart," he snarled. "You think you've won something. But you haven't won anything. You've lost your wife, you've lost your house, and now you're going to lose your teeth." "Trent, don't," Allie said, but there was no real conviction in her voice. He came at me again, this time with more control, his fists raised like he was in a boxing ring instead of an empty house. I'd been in exactly 3 fights in my adult life, and I'd lost 2 of them. But I'd also spent 15 years working construction and electrical jobs, and my hands were harder than his gym-sculpted muscles. When he threw his first punch, I caught his wrist and twisted, using his own momentum to send him stumbling backward. When he tried again, I grabbed him by the shoulders and shoved him hard enough to send him crashing into the far wall. "Stay down, Trent." But he didn't stay down. He came at me a 3rd time, and this time I was done playing defense. I hit him once, a solid right cross to the jaw that sent him sprawling across the hardwood floor. He lay there for a moment, stunned, blood trickling from his split lip. "Jesus, Pete!" Allie screamed. "You didn't have to hit him. He came at me 3 times, Allie. What did you expect me to do? He's just upset. We both are. You destroyed our lives." "I destroyed your lives? You 2 destroyed your own lives. I just stopped enabling it." The sirens were getting closer now, maybe 2 minutes away. Trent was sitting up, holding his jaw, looking at me with a mixture of hatred and newfound respect. Allie was crying. the kind of ugly, desperate tears that come when someone realizes they've lost control of their own story. "What do you want from us?" she asked. "I want you to leave. I want you to stop breaking into houses that don't belong to you. I want you to stop pretending that I'm the villain in this situation." "Where are we supposed to go?" "I don't know, Allie. That's not my problem anymore." The police arrived just as Trent was getting back to his feet. 2 officers, both of whom looked like they'd dealt with this kind of domestic drama more times than they cared to count. They separated us, took statements, and ultimately decided that since no one was seriously hurt and the house technically still belonged to both Allie and me, no charges would be filed. But the damage was done. By morning, the entire neighborhood knew about the break-in, the fight, and the spectacular meltdown that had preceded it. Monica, who'd apparently been monitoring the situation from her bedroom window, had provided a minute-by-minute account to anyone who would listen. Allie's reputation, which had been hanging by a thread, finally snapped completely. The woman who'd once been the queen of Briarwood social circles was now the cautionary tale that other wives whispered about at book clubs and coffee shops. As for Trent, his gym never reopened. Between the safety violations, the negative publicity, and the fact that half his clientele now knew he was the kind of guy who broke into other people's houses, his business was finished. Last I heard, he'd moved back in with his parents and was working at a chain fitness center in the next town over. 3 days after the break-in, Allie called me one last time. "Pete," she said, her voice small and defeated. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of it. I know you are, Allie. Is there any way we can fix this?" I looked around my small apartment, at Maddie doing her homework at the kitchen table, at the life we'd built without her. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was real. It was ours. "No, Allie, there isn't. What happens now? Now you figure out how to be happy without me. And I figure out how to be happy without you. What about Maddie? Maddie will always be your daughter. But she's going to live with me. Pete, goodbye, Allie." I hung up the phone and looked at my daughter, who'd been pretending not to listen to the conversation. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, and meant it. "I'm okay." 6 months later, the divorce was final. Allie moved to a different state, took a job with a real estate company that didn't know about her history, and started over. She calls Maddie once a week, and they have a relationship that's polite but distant. Trent disappeared entirely. Some people said he moved to Florida, others claimed he'd gone back to school. Nobody really cared enough to find out for sure. As for me, I kept working, kept raising my daughter, and kept living in Briarwood like nothing had happened, because in the end, nothing really had happened. A marriage had ended, some people had shown their true colors, and life had moved on. The only difference was that now, when people in the neighborhood talked about Pete Halverson, they didn't call him a blue-collar nobody. They called him the guy who'd stood up for himself when it mattered most. And that, I decided, was a reputation I could live with, 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 live with.